Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, will make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.
Good evening and welcome, folks. You're back to Thursday's episode of Gaelic Lives. Monday was all about the club championships around Ulster in the current day. Now we're hitting rewind back 20 years to St Gall's winning the Antrim and Ulster championships and going all the way to All Ireland. It was a big breakthrough, winning Ulster. Thankfully, I'm joined this evening by John Rafferty, a man who played for St Gall's, managed them, knows all the good times and bad times of that era. John, first of all, anytime we're talking about football, so it's good to be talking again. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Mal. Thanks very much for the invite. And as you know rightly, when you can see in the backstage stuff at the start, I have to thank Catherine for getting me linked into here because I had been struggling with the technology.
Oh, you've sold yourself short there. Peter McDonald was on a few weeks ago, and he didn't tell anybody anything. It was all he didn't have a disclaimer. So, I suppose first of all, my uncle lived beside you up in Willowvale, and I always remember him saying that John Rafferty had lived down 2 doors down or whatever, and there was a connection. And am I right in saying that you taught in the Sal for a while and then you ended up with St Gall's? So how does that come about? Because I know we're talking about St Gall's, but I suppose it's about you joining in and how things came about.
Yeah. Well, I suppose Catherine, my wife Catherine, was reared 2 doors down from Mickey, and in the summer of '89, St Mary's had just won the Sigerson, and Catherine was working in the Andersonstown Leisure Centre in the summer scheme, and it was run by Sean McGordy of St Gall's, and Sean's lads, Kieran and Kevin and CJ all played for St Gall's round about that time. And one day it came up in conversation that Catherine was going out to me, and Sean I bumped into Sean when I was chatting to Catherine at lunchtime or whatever it was at the leisure centre. And one thing led to another, and I ended up getting my first game for St Gall's. It was a game Lav Yarrig in around about October, November time of '89, and probably their last league game. And we're very lucky that Charlie Sweeney, God rest him, came in to manage St Gall's in 1990, and we won the championship and had a good run to the semi-final in the Ulster Club Championship. And I'd say, yes, it was a good Kings Court team and beat us, but on a very, very wet day. And if we had even got a draw that day in Kings Court and got them back to Casement, I think would have been very happy to get them back to Casement. And then Lavey won the Ulster Club that year, and we had played a challenge match against Lavey earlier on the summer up in Gullerduff, and it had been a cracking game of football, but we just didn't get the lick at them in the Ulster Club final that year because we could beat by a goal in the last minute down in Kings Court. But it maybe just as well we didn't get the Ulster Club final because Seamus Downey said I was going to get done.
And here, you didn't do an overnight up in Abbey for your challenge game, or was it all very strictly straight-laced football and home again? You didn't,
to his credit, Charlie didn't need to gild the lily. What he told you before the game and at half time and in training was plenty, and I have to say the fellas around about that time that were playing for St Gall's were very, very good and very, very committed. Like Jerry McCrarn and Sean McGordy. I was just chatting around, God rest Big John Kennedy and Shamie McGorn. There's a fella, Mickey Carr, played in 1990 and then he went to America in 91. Mickey Carr is one of the best players I ever played with. And of course, Lenny was there at that time and Peter Dallin, Slim Dallin was playing for Matty Call. And I can remember being disappointed after the semi-final of the Ulster Club Championship, and Peter put his arm around me and he says, look, John, he says, if you'd have been playing for the Past tonight, this year, or I'd have been playing for Matty Call, we wouldn't have been playing in an Ulster Club semi-final. And I thought it was a very measured and good statement, from Peter, but a good footballer too. There was a lot of good players in that team. Um,
And
Peter
around that
Stewart,
time,
Peter Stewart played wing half back for St. Gall's. He was an absolute Rolls Royce as well. A Rolls Royce.
sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, just
Around that time, Carrigan and St. Paul's had their own rivalry, and St. Gall's weren't as dominant as they were after that. So, what was the club scene like just around that time before we sort of head onto your management side of things?
yeah. Well, at that time, Rossa had won the championship in '89, and then Rossa put us out of the championship in '91 as champions, and then went on. So Rossa won it in '89, '91. Yash Armstrong was playing, and Donald. They had a lot of good players too. But at that stage, I would say anyone easy mal of 5-6 clubs. Carrigan were always there about St. Paul's. St. Paul's was an emerging young team, and it was a very, very good team. In particular, I remember Donna Finnegan being a real good full forward for them. And Chris Murphy was an able big fella in the middle of the field. Joe Quinn, I taught Joe in the Saal. And then in '97, St. Paul's beat us in a county final, and they went on and drew, I think, with Balahi in the Ulster Club Championship. But Balahi beat them after replay, and that was a Balahi team that got to an All-Ireland club final. So the standard of club football in Antrim at that time was really, really good. And you had 5 or 6 teams that would have been always able to fancy their chances to win it, but it was a great competition. It was a great competition. And then the icing on the cake was when the second time we beat Carrigan in the final in '90 and '93. In '93 we give them a good game now in '93, and the final was in Casement, and it was one of the high points. Like, I played in Jones's Road, and it was lovely to play in headquarters. But I'll tell you one thing: there was nowhere like Casement. And it's an absolute pity. I'm being really polite when I say pity. It's an absolute disgrace that it is the way it is, because it breaks my heart still going up to visit Catherine's mummy. They passed it on. It's a shambles. Like, to close it and spend 12 million to have it worse now than it was when they closed after spending 12 million is unforgivable. It's unforgivable for the Antrim Gales. And I'll tell you one thing: Antrim Gales are good people. They are good people because they're knocked back many a time, but they still get up and go forward and push their games, and they don't get any credit for it, especially people in West Belfast, because it wasn't always easy for them playing it, and playing hurling and football, but they kept it going.
And was there much of a link between St. Gall's and LaSalle? Is there some sort of link?
There'd have been a lot of fellas now. Like I say, Sean McGordy. I was very, very lucky. Met Sean McGordy. Is one of the significant others in my life, outside of family. I was very lucky. Like, Daddy, God be good him, and Uncle Oney, God be good him, harboured a severe love of football for me as a child. And you didn't get out of the pass unless you were going with Daddy or Uncle Oney to a match. You didn't get too far. But outside of that, the people I bumped into in my life, like Danny Quinn, was very important to me when I met him at college. But I worked for and with Sean McGordy. Sean was head of PE in LaSalle when I was there, and he was still is an absolute gentleman who puts the games and the children who play the games first, far more than his own. Sean McGordy could have been anything. Sean McGordy could have been a principal. He could have been the Minister of Education if he had been a narcissist and looked after himself. But he put the boys and the players and the club, he pushed them all the time, and he put a massive amount of his energy into a lot of people, and everybody benefited to a great degree. If he had put all that energy into himself, he could have done anything he wanted. But Sean McGordy was an absolute gentleman to work for, and he's still a gentleman every time you bump into him. The work he does for the Ulster schools at the present time is top class. A complete gentleman. And there was a lot of fellas then who had been at LaSalle, ended up playing for St. Gall's as well, but you didn't necessarily get to play for St. Gall's, if you were at LaSalle. Like Lenny Harbinson was a past pupil of LaSalle and a great player for St. Gall's. But Paul Buchanan will say he went to LaSalle, he played for the Derg, and Buki down there got me that summer of '89. I think Sean just got out of the leisure centre just before me. I could have ended up playing for the Derg as well, but it worked out very well. I was very, very honoured and privileged to have an adopted club like St. Gall's down in Belfast, and I enjoyed every minute playing for them.
And what was that like going in? Like you're obviously an outsider in terms of being an Armagh man, but you're teaching the community. You know the people. What's that
Yeah.
like?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It was brilliant, and a great credit to the chairman and secretary at the time. You had Liam Stewart, God rest him, and Vincent Ward. Two absolute gentlemen. And I mean absolute gentlemen. Mal, when I was there, they made you feel so welcome. It was unbelievable. And good fellas like them. They never got credit. Like, you can tiptoe around it all we like, but times was tough in the 80s in West Belfast and up and down the Falls Road. It wasn't always easy for young fellas, they were getting knocked about and hassled and one thing and another. You could have been laid one way or another, but people like Vincent and Liam kept football and hurling going for hundreds and hundreds of young fellas to give them a positive way, to express their Irish identity, but they never get any credit for it, and then it was just, you were made feel so welcome, and I'm very lucky too. There's a cracking English teacher in LaSalle called Frank McGuire, and I could tell you great stories about Frank. When we were going to schools matches, Frank used to drive the bus for me, and we used to have great crack going up and down to the matches. And if we have time, there was one cracking story. We had an under-16 team who got to it was a quarter final of a hurl cup, and the boys did very well to get the quarter final, and then went down. We had to play the high school, Patrician High School from Carrickmore Cross, and Big Eamon Dunn was over them. I can't remember who was refereeing it, but it was a very competitive match, and
You're picking your words well. You're picking your words well.
They would want to end up in court, but it ended up there might have been a touch of a fracas towards the end of it, and I had been, I made no apologies for it. I always told the boys, to be disciplined, keep your discipline, because I was blessed that, at the ranch, at Mr. McKeever and Peter Finn, about discipline and the need for discipline when you're playing. And I was very lucky, and Ray Morgan and Pete McGrath had reinforced that then at St. Coleman's. But the great thing about people in West Belfast is you get what you see. And if you start to mess them about, if you're good to them, they'll be good back to you. But if you start messing them about, then you'll get it back, and you'll get it back in spades. So a lot of boys from Carrick maybe thought they'd trump into the townies and the townies would lay down. Did not happen. And there's a couple of fellas in particular, Ricardo McGravy, if Ricardo's here, and he was sitting at the front of the bus, and I got on the bus, and I was fuming, and Eamon and I had a robust discussion about it after the game, and Frank was sitting, God bless him, God rest him. Frank always took a flask of tea with him, and he took an extra cup for me. And I got onto the bus, and I sat down. Frank was drinking his tea, and he knew I was crossing. He put his head down, he was drinking the tea. And I says, "Boys, sit down, be quiet." Maybe a wee bit louder than that. And I said, "See what happened there now?" And all the fellas put their heads down. I said, "I'm not ashamed of it." I said, "Boys, I'm proud of you for what he's done there towards the end of that game." And poor Frank, he put the tea all around the windscreen. Frank couldn't get over this, that I had been hammering it into them about discipline before the game started. But they didn't initiate the coming together, but they didn't shy away from it when the bit come to the bit. But it was very funny. But of course, I wouldn't advocate that ever, Mal. You would know.
Like unbelievable memories of playing, as you say, and I suppose links to school. But like, was management something you thought about? Was managing St. Gall something you thought about, or how did that come about? Because it obviously was a different chapter for you after that.
Yeah, I'd be totally blunt about it, Mal. It was something that had never really crossed my mind. I was always very pleased and privileged to have played for St. Gall's. And then at the start of 2004, I had managed Blaney in 2003, and we had won the championship in 2003, and we set out to go one step further in 2004, and we set out a training regime. And there would have been a bunch of younger players didn't buy into it, And I knew when they didn't buy into it that we weren't really going to make any progress. So I look, there's no point tiptoeing around about it. The fellas and me, it just didn't click at the start of 2004. I was a bit disappointed that the younger fellas didn't really want to do the extra work, and found myself at a loose end and bumped into Mark McCrory. And Mark won, and I had played with Mark for St. Galls, and I played with Armagh with Mark, and one word led to another. And Mickey Culbert Mickey's an awful good fella too. Mickey had taken them to an Ulster club final or semi-final or final, again the Loop, a Loop team coached by Malachy O'Rourke, and the Loop had won that. I think Joe O'Kane might have been the captain that year, and Paul McFlynn, and a lot of good players in that Loop team too. And like I say, one word led to another, and St. Galls were at a loose end, and I was at a loose end. So we said we'd give it a go for 1 year, and it ended up 3 years, but there were 3 special years, and we won everything bar one, and the bar one is still, it's the one. I've never watched it, but we won everything bar one. And you can't go back and do it again.
we'll get to that later. And I suppose I know you, and I know your mentality, and probably it's that saying where it's the one that get away that you think about most. But you touched on something there. Like, I think Ballinderry had beat St. Galls after a replay, and Glen went and won the All-Ireland. Enniskillen beat them and got to an Ulster final. Loop won Ulster. So after not winning a championship since 93, then you come along 01, 02, whatever. So they were starting to knock.
Yeah.
And then I was reading something today, when just doing a wee bit of research before we come on here, where you talked about the defeat to Carrickmore, and that just things went wrong and it didn't go the way it went. And is that something that festered over the winter? Is that something you took something from? Because obviously 05 was different.
Yeah, well, like I say, Mal, like you and I know each other a long time, Mal, and you've hit the nail on the head. Nobody likes getting beat, and I make no apologies for it. I loathe it. I loathe getting beat. I wouldn't want to win by cheating, but I hate getting beat. And when we won the championship in 04, the fellas probably had an expectation that they were getting closer to an Ulster club in 2004, and a good Carrickmore team, and coached by Dom Carrick, and Dom's cute here, Dom knows the crack, and I have a lot of time for Dom. He's, so there was no shame in getting beat by a Carrickmore that was littered with Tyrone County players, former and present in 2004, some of them who would go on to win All Ireland in 2005. So there was no shame in it, but.
And they had wild tradition themselves in Tyrone.
Yeah, and the Carrickmore's Carrickmore at the end of the day, and you have to tip your hat to them that from a relatively small pick like they are, if you beat Carrickmore in the championship, you've done well. It doesn't matter who you are, you've done well. And but we set about a wee bit earlier, probably in 2004. We got together a wee bit late in 2004. Between myself and St. Galls, but come 2005, the winter of 04-05, we changed things up a bit, and to their credit, the players responded magnificently, and it wasn't easy. Well, I'm telling you, they put a lot of time and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and they turned it around, and it was. I wouldn't say it was fortunate that it was Carrickmore again, because Mickey Culbert had blended a great winning team, and that team knew how to win. It just needed something slightly different to take them from knowing how to win comfortably for a wee while in Antrim. And in the Ulster club, when they've been beaten in the previous couple of years, the teams that beat them are real good teams. And so it all boiled down to hard work and maybe wee bits and pieces that we just fine-tuned here, there, and everywhere. But Mickey Culbert had the blocks and the scratch coat done. All we put was the finish on it, and but it worked out very well in that. In the summer of 2005, we played a series of great challenge matches around the country, and the boys, it didn't matter. If you'd have played at 6 o'clock in the morning in anywhere, every fellow was accounted for, and the fact that Mickey had taken them so far was a great reflection on the likes of Frank Maguire, God rest him, that I mentioned earlier, and Liam and Sean Kelly, that's Sean's daddy, and Vincent Ward and Sean McGordy. Like those fellas at under 10 or under 12, if they couldn't get left down to training, were picked up by Frank Maguire, God rest him, in a minibus and brought to training. Mm-hmm. The amount of work that went into them bunch of chaps from under 10, under 12, so they'd been together for, 8, 10, 12 years because the club had invested in their youth, and at that stage, they were used to winning. They knew how to win. They'd won minor championships. And they'd won the couple of championships that they won in 01, 02, and around that there. They were starting to come. I can remember playing against them, the reserve team, one night in Ballyholland, and I'm going to be blunt. Mickey Culbert and me had a very long conversation after that night that I was in my early 30s.
Was this you playing for the Pass?
I was playing for the
them?
Pass, against the Gall's reserves, and we got we played in Ballyholland one night, and we had a great game. But at that stage, the Pass were, the Pass had won the championship in '97, the junior championship, and were competitive in the intermediate championship. And Mickey and I had a long conversation after that night that I was only 2 years away from St. Gall's. And Mickey wondered what I like another wee go at it, and I would have given my eye teeth to play with that St. Gall's team. Mm-hmm. But at that stage, having almost been decapitated when I went to play the first time, it was simply impossible. But I would have loved to have played with them fellas. I would have loved to have played with them fellas because they were a cracking bunch of fellas. I might not go on. I might have been an impact sub in my mid-30s, but I still was in right good shape. And Mickey and me, we talked about it 2 or 3 times, but it just didn't come to fruition. So I didn't get to play with them, but I got to work with them, which was equally as good. Well, it's not equally as good, like Mal, because nothing beats playing, but it was as good as I could get it.
You're going to manage a team, and you've obviously been around a few corners in terms of management, but you need good players, you need leaders, and from somebody who's not from St. Gall's looking on over the wire, that's what you seem to have as well. And obviously people that have been used to success also.
Yeah, the simplicity of things, and like Kieran McCrossan, who scored the goal in the Ulster Club final that year, was a solid, good citizen. And I used to call him Dragish because, from the club down in Tyrone, he was a good fella. But the simplicity of things, like Terry O'Neill. Terry O'Neill played, can't remember whether it was the Ulster Club semi-final or the Ulster Club final, with his leg broke. He had a fracture. He went hard for a ball. It could well have been in a game against Balahi and fractured the tibia or the fibia, one or the other, but didn't come off. And you talk, you see sometimes them boys in the Premiership, and I've not had again them. They talk about leadership and character. That St. Gall's team had character in skipfuls, and if a team got 2 or 3 points ahead of them, they didn't panic. They never panicked because they knew they could play their way back in. That Sean Kelly was without a doubt, and I mean without a doubt, one of the best footballers I have ever witnessed playing football in my life. He never even touched the ground. He glided across the top of it, and he never made mistakes, And if Sean Burns had been born in Derry or Tyrone or Down or Armagh, he'd have an All-Ireland medal. And I played with a lot of good fellas at county level, and I played against a lot of good fellas. No forward ever in my time playing was better than Sean Burns, who played centre half forward there at that team. He was an absolute Rolls Royce, but they weren't on their own. There was good players everywhere. And then fellas like Gribbies come in. I think he's Paul Veronica now, I think he's called, and was a completely effective. Colin Brady at fullback, cornerback to Simon Kennedy, all them fellas. I think that what their biggest strength was, Mal, was that they put the team first. They knew they had individual abilities, and each man played to his ability, and he didn't try to do things that he wasn't cut out to do, or he wasn't able to do. You knew that Terry O'Neill could put it in the top corner from 30 yards out if he got half a chance, because he was the best driver of the ball in the team. Sean Burns could float freeze over for fun. Mark McCrory had great hands. Dragish was a great walker, came across and could walk his socks off in the middle of the field. And Sean Kelly was just Sean Kelly. And Mr. McGurr was extremely effective when it came in around break ball and stuff like that there. But every fella put the blue jersey first. And the living embodiment, and people I have chatted to in the past, and even teams in school, I always say BMW. Before me is we. And that's St. Gall's team. They put the we first. And that was why they led. Every fella knew he was good at something, and he kept doing that something over and over again. And they had that wee bit of stardust sprinkled through the rest of it, like Sean Kelly, Burnsy, And then when CJ came into it, Kieran McGordy was the best user of a ball. Then the apple never falls far from the tree, man. But Kieran could use a ball, and then CJ was just starting to make the breakthrough. That's kid that could have scored for fun. He could have scored for fun.
I remember when he scored against Nemo that day on the TV. He might have been, at that stage, LaSalle, correct me here, they were in an All-Ireland series, and you might have been just working, he was in and out. And I remember him scoring an important point that day in Portlaoise, and that was him sort of coming onto the scene.
Yeah, I think round about that time, CJ was on a team that won the McLaren and in LaSalle. And I'll tell you how significant CJ was as a player, and how clever his daddy was as coach. I can't remember the game, but LaSalle were playing in maybe a quarter-final or a semi-final or an important group game in the McLaren on one of those horrendous winter days when anybody who takes a school team wonders about their sanity when they get down the water, running down everywhere.
It seems to be part of the job.
Yeah, water running down the shuck that nobody wants to talk about and running off the end of your nose. And against the wind, CJ played full back and was dominant in full back. And with the wind, he played full forward and was dominant at full forward. And that indicates Sean knew to keep him in the game. It didn't matter where you play him. He was going to be good at it. But he was 17 coming. He was just 17-ish that's autumn, winter that we had the good run 20 years ago. God, I hope the next 20 years don't go as quick as the last 20 years now. When you rang me, man, I had to say I was gunked. I never thought about it. When you get busy, go, sweet mother God, 20 years. But I hope the next 20 years don't go to, as you see, I kept the hair. But
you touched on CJ. I remember going up, I think it was 2005. They won the minor championship and they played Ballinascreen up at St. Paul's. And St. Paul's and the McCrory Cup are a wee bit the same. It's the breeze. There's no shelter, but it was the same thing. He played in defence against the breeze and up front with the breeze. Same sort of scenario. So you got to play your men where you need them.
Oh, you need your strong men where the action's going to be. There's no point in having a Rolls Royce parked in the garage. It needs to be on the road. And if there's a lot of traffic in your own half of the field, that's where you want your good players playing. But CJ was just coming on and see an immense talent. But then the apple never falls far from the tree. When he's bred out of a Harbinson and a McGordy, he's doing all right, man.
Here, like you touched on the fact the BMW mentality and that some Galls had that where they put the team first. Where does that come from? Is that just I think being passed down, or is it something you brought in, or was it before you? Was it the managers before you, or what?
Yeah, I can't take credit for that. Again, like I say, that's Vincent Ward, Liam Stewart, Frank McGuire, Mickey Culbert, Sean McGordy, all them fellas instilled a great love of St. Gall's. And St. Gall's was you will never hear any controversy over that St. Gall's team. They won it in 2010 because they did X, Y, or Z, won the All-Ireland. No one would ever deny St. Gall's that Ulster Club in 2005, and then the All-Ireland in 2010. And I was delighted. I was in Croke Park that day too. But because they were genuine people, and those kids understood that the club was investing huge amounts of time in them, and they're good people. And that's what I'm saying is I'm married to Catherine, and Catherine's from Willowvale, as you know, and she would always tell you that West is best anyway. So so St. Gall's was the cherry on the cake and the living embodiment that West is best, and them boys love the club. If you look at the present time now, St. Gall's are doing really well in the championship this year in the group of death in Antrim. And the fellas who played in 20 years ago are managing the team now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's perfect. It's perfect. You see Sean Kelly sitting along the line there, and here's some start. If a young fella at 21 or 22 years of age, or 31 or 32 years of age, is asked to do something with Sean Kelly in a blue jersey, you go and do it. And that's it, because he did it. And if he's asking you to do it, it's the right thing to do.
I saw John Rafferty's training up close at Slaughtneil. There was pressure cookers and gutters and all those types of things. So put the clock back 20 years between Carrickmore's defeat and going to win Ulster. You say you went back to basics. Was it basics in terms of fitness levels? What is the basics for that group?
Yeah, well, I was very lucky in the sense that I kept on very early in life. When it come to football, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and I listened to people. I remember Jared Hoolan telling me that one of the best coaches he ever had was Brother Ennis, God rest him, Brother Lawrence, and he said he spent 15 or 20 minutes at the start of every session doing the absolute basics. The absolute basics, the fundamentals of the game, winning possession, keeping possession, using possession, all those. So during that winter, and yes, Mal, you know it, and that's why I have to have the maroon on to acknowledge the Emmets for you. You have to test the basics under pressure. Be it against time, or be it against a good opponent, or maybe 2 opponents against you in the pressure cookers, and then that we did a lot of sessions in Falls Park. We did a lot of sessions in LaSalle School in the depths of the winter when nobody else was training. And the fellas, when the pressure was on in games, Portland gave St. Gall's a great game in the county final that year.
11-8 or something, so it tells me it was a title.
It was a good game, and it was everybody. People would put this in young fellas' heads, or it's a shooty in session, but when the pressure was on, that panel, to their credit, knew that they had the work done. And that when the pressure's on, unless you're a CJ McGorty or a Sean Burns or a Sean Kelly, or a Kieran McGorty picking out a pass after picking up a break ball that nobody else would even go for, do the basics, do the simple things well. And that was the endearing strength that St. Gall's team had, that they knew they had the work done, and all they had to do was apply the basics under pressure. And because they did, they really did. Be it gutters or wind, it didn't matter. And that's what I'm saying, to their credit during the winter. I remember Vincent and Liam, God rest them, they were very cross for me. We were on the pitch in January, and we were working on, like, the crack. Mm-hmm. The crack, Mal. Some of it, it's not Premiership stuff I'm doing.
And it's not the groundsman's friend.
No, it's not the ground. I can remember, God rest the two of them, saying in March time there wasn't much grass in particular areas of the field. Now I did try to keep moving it about, that we didn't use the same bit of the field all the time. The 2 boys give out to me and say, John, you've wrecked bits and pieces of that pitch. And I said, look, it'll be all right. And it nearly worked out to perfection, but it was all right. Come November time, when Seamus McFerrin was sitting on the front of the bus coming home, it was all right. There's no word of the grass then, man.
And here, the celebrations after beating Portland, I mean 4 or 5 in a row at that stage. I think maybe 5 in a row, 1, 2, 3, 5 in a row. So when do you realise it's Carrickmore?
Well, I suppose
Or when do you even mention Carrickmore?
it was Kieran McGurdy passed a comment about me one time in 2005. When I was playing for the Pass underage in 8 years, I won one game of football in 8 years. Well, so
that's why you hate losing so much.
I'm telling you, people just don't understand. But so automatically, when we were getting back into the car to go home for 9 games, you were automatically looking forward to the next game. And I remember in 2005, 2 things stuck out, and Kieran made reference to it, that we won the All-Ireland Sevens in 2005 down Kilmacud. Mm-hmm. And the fellas, rightly so, were delighted, but they were great team. Great team. And
he was the goalie in that team, wasn't he?
That's
he was
right.
the keeper.
Kieran was in goal. But his daddy, I got beat in the Kilmacud Sevens final in 93, I think. And Sean was in goals that day. But we played, I think you were allowed 9 of a panel at that stage. Mm-hmm. And we had, in the first game, Jerry McCarran, who was a cracking player too, went over on his ankle, and we were playing Jargon the following week, I think, in the county final. And Jerry couldn't play all day. So we were, from the first game, we were down to 8. And Mark McCrory got a dead. Jerome Quinn's brother Stephen from Oma was playing in the middle of the field for us, and Stephen got a dead leg in the second game. So we did our best. Yeah. So Stephen could. Yeah, with no sub. So Stephen at the start of the first half and the start of the second half went for the throw in at the start, and then had to come off. So we played all day with 7, and we got to the final. And there was a point in it either way against a real good Bransford team with Eamon Burns, God rest him, and Benny Corrigan was in that team. But and Bransford were the king of the sevens at that stage. There was a point in it either way at halftime. We completely blew up in the second half, and Bransford won it fair and square. But it was one of my greatest regrets again to go back up the road that day. And Derry won the All-Ireland the next day, and I had Mommy, I took Mommy down to see the match on the next day, and our Joseph was on the way, so Kathleen didn't get to the game, but Mommy came down. So in 2005, we won it with St. Gall's, and we come into the change rooms, and the fellas were delighted, and they were going for the wee bit of dinner and probably a bottle or 2 after it. And,
this is after the Portnoy county final?
No, this after the sevens. I put my hand across the door, and I just realised that this was significant. And I put my hand across the door, and I said, "You remember this, boys?" I said, "I could take you up to St. Gall's, saying we could play sevens competition on Monday night, and you could get beat by the next 10 men from St. Gall." So I said, "So if you're good enough to win an A All-Ireland at sevens, why are you not good enough to win an A All-Ireland at 15-a-side instead of 7-a-side?" And Kieran looked at me, and Kieran wasn't impressed that already I was saying, yeah, I put the challenge down immediately, and it worked, because we did play sevens, in training, and the next 7 were as good as the first 7, and that's not to take away from the fact that the first 7 were super. And I'll be honest, I went in after the Portnoy game. I was very cross. After the Portnoy final, because Sean Kelly had been given a bad ball, a hospital pass, and broke his collarbone with minutes to go. And I can't go verbatim what I said, but I said, "Enjoy your bottle of beer tonight." Said it was a Sunday, but we'll be training on Tuesday night. And anybody who's not fit to be there on Tuesday night because they're drinking on Monday, say, "Don't be coming back." And I says, we're now a man down going into a Carrickmore game, and that man was Sean Kelly. And he didn't appear until the last 2 or 3 minutes of the Ulster Club final game. But I wanted him on the field for when the whistle went, even though it was still tight. So I was very cross that day that somebody got hurt, and because it was just a wee bit of, just let's see out the game rather than make sure keep the thing done right to the end. So I was cross, and I was automatically thinking as I was coming off the field that, right now, here's one of our really good players. and we're going to have to plan without him for the Ulster club. So already, as the fellas were being presented the cup on casement, I was saying, right, what am I going to do now? Again, and that throws back to those 8 years and winning one match in 8 years. Well, with St Joseph's, as it was at that stage, that was a combination of points pass and the summon, and we with the two clubs were tiny and they're combined for 35 years with a great wee amalgamation, and automatically I was thinking on the next game, and that was Carrickmore, but we got it sorted out. But the fellas knew themselves that by the time Tuesday night come, the county final was put to bed, and that's not to take away from how I have 2 championship medals with St Galls, and I know exactly where they are in the house now. I could go and put my hand on them immediately, and they're there with the championship medal that I won with Armagh, and they're every bit as special to me as that Armagh medal, so that's not to take away from the fact that winning the county championship isn't important, because it was, but we had to push on, and we had to push on with a man down, and I was crossing the change rooms. I know you find that hard to believe, Ma.
Very quickly before we move on to Ulster, just to clear up the sevens thing, a lot of clubs wouldn't go to the sevens in the middle of their season because extra games or distraction or whatever, but St Galls always seemed to go regardless. Was it seen as extra training? Was it just seen as a chance to win something? Or was it the style of play? Was it something that helped your style of play, that the sevens? Or, yourself, a lot of clubs even belittle their own league, that the championship's the only thing that matters and everything else is a distraction. But I just always wondered why you went with the risk of injury. Was it just there was obviously something to bet? There was a benefit from it.
Well, I remember even like from 1990 on, we had to go down to Kilmacud nearly every year, and I think the year in 2004 we had a lot of injuries. We were coming up to the county final, and we were careful. I think we missed the sevens in 2004, and Vincent, God rest him, was cross with me, but it worked out all right in the long run. See, I was very lucky, Mal, in that I had Mr. McKeever at St Mary's, and he reinforced the fact, see small sided games and sevens, and like I'm not that long finished reading his book. Like he played for the Ballymcguigan team that was never beat in the carnivals the whole way through the one particular summer.
Newbridge, maybe.
Or Newbridge, Ballymcguigan. And there's a great story in it about Ballymcguigan.
Bridgeville, we crossed that.
That's But
go ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of times, and I would still if you have lots of fellas down in training, I can remember that in 2005, we comfortably would have had 40 fellas training nearly every night for St Galls, between the seniors, the reserves, and the South Antrim team, and there was no distinction made between any fellas. They all were welcome to come to training. So we used sevens quite a bit in training, and it was competitive and fun at the same time, and everybody enjoyed it, So even in the week running, I can remember in the week running up to winning the sevens in 2005, we had a competition in training over 2 nights for the fellas, for the top 10 to be picked to go down to Kilmacud on the Saturday, and it was great crack, and so I think if you like a fella could roll his ankle getting out of the car, coming to training,
Paddy Murray, for example.
But I bumped into Paddy recently.
But that's not even football related. Do you know what I mean? So
if a fella gets hurt in training or something like that, then it's an acceptable risk. There's those wee things they're gonna happen. But even for Paddy to get hit with a slate that time in the run up to the club final, you couldn't have wrote it.
I couldn't just find it's just a complete freak.
But
without Sean Kelly, then you obviously beat Carrickmore 111-8, which is in Ulster club terms a 6-point is significant because they're usually 1-point games.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Because
I think the fellas, then, to their credit, were smart, and they were very close to the loop 2 years prior to that, and then let it slip again in Carrickmore in 2004. And there was a sense of this is not going to, and not to overcook the cake, it was in casement. and Casement is a wide open, beautiful pitch, and St. Gall's could play lovely football. They could play lovely football, and I had my homework done going into the game. You just have to say there's evenings you're taking training. Catherine, God bless her, would say that in that run, and that even though when I was at home, I wasn't at home. At that time you'd have been tapping into DVDs, and you're getting DVDs from here, there, and ever, and that I wouldn't be into this technological mumbo jumbo about splitting games up and one thing and another. Now I wouldn't have the credit for it, but when it come to DVD, I could work a DVD player, and we had a lot of work done to get past Carrickmore, because I felt in my heart that if the fellas could get that put to bed, a monkey off the back, if you want to use the match of the day terminology, but if they that put to bed and a good team beat, that would relight the fires, to give it a real good rattle in Ulster.
What was the feeling like at the final whistle that day? There was no cup, but it was a big.
It was relief, because I think the key to the whole thing is there was almost a sense of entitlement in 2004. That
because they'd been because they lost the teams
yes,
that were
in 2003 that have been, so it's only a matter of, when we do the same thing again, and we'll take it that one step further. So I knew that the players felt that they hadn't expressed themselves the way they were well fit to do, and above all else, going out to play for St. Gall's, they were to go and play. And we played with Sean McGordy is the greatest man in the world for tennis. You play with who you have. You don't play with who's missing. If somebody's suspended or somebody's hurt, they are suspended and they are hurt. But you have 15 fellas on the field starting the game. Go and play with what you have. And that day, to their credit, they were super. And I can remember when one of those early autumn evenings, it was just heartening. Man, it was just a lovely day for a game of football. And then the focus changed, switched to Mayo Bridge very quickly.
And they'd been in Ulster final a couple of years before that with Ballinderry.
That's right.
And they'd won something like they'd won a lot of down championships in a row. I'm not sure the number, maybe 8, around that time.
It was a good Mayo Bridge team, and it was in Newry, and we had bits and pieces to do. Even the very fact that at that stage the Marshes was a clay-based pitch. And we travelled into the vicinity of Newry and played a match among ourselves on a clay-based pitch, to get wee bits and pieces to try and get them focused on us straight away. That's the weekend before the game.
On that pitch or another pitch?
No, another clay-based pitch in the Newry area, and one of the local clubs was very good to let us in and let us play away. So the fellas were used to the distance that they were going to be travelling that Sunday morning, and then we went up, and Oliver Mooney, to his credit, up in St. Paul's, we went up and warmed up in St. Paul's for the Mayo Bridge game, and then come down, and it was a good game of football too. That's what I was saying. St. Gall's played really, really well that day, so they did. And with a team, okay, I suppose I was at a slight advantage, and I had taught a lot of their good players in the Abbey, Ronan Saxton, Michael Walsh, fellas like that who were playing for Mayo Bridge, and they were top class fellas. First and foremost, Ronan Saxton, pound for pound, was something else. Pocket rocket. He was a great fella, great player too. So I had a fair idea about that Mayo Bridge team from my own experience, and we tried our best to get our matchup rights, and then everything worked out okay. Everything worked out okay that day. The matchups worked out okay, and it was spicy, but it was fair. But it was a good game of football, so it was. I'm just glad Mickey Linton was the age he was, and he wasn't 10 years younger when he was coming on, because another Rolls Royce,
Oh, flying machine! He put the rest of us to shame.
Yeah.
And how do you sort of compare the two performances? Because Carrickmore, we spoke about already in the pod about their tradition, and Mayo Bridge the same. Or were they different games?
Well, the two games were completely different in that there was baggage from the previous year for the, from the Carrickmore game. And once we got the length of semi-final, we reinforced that the team had unfinished business as regards getting back to an Ulster club final, and that they were going to play a good Down team at home in Down, and they wouldn't have been fancy to win it because Mayo Bridge were going really well that year. And I had seen Mayo Bridge playing once or twice in their own club championship. It's handy for me because half a point's pass here, when you go over the railway lines, you're into County Down anyway, so it's not as if it's too far to go to see the games. And so I'd seen the Bridge playing a couple of times that year, and I knew that if St. Gall's played well, they'd win the game. And that wasn't to take away from Mayo Bridge, because that was a very good Mayo Bridge team. But I knew that if St. Gall, and if they got a fair crack of the whip, sometimes when you're playing away from home in a semi-final, it can go against you. You get the odd decision to go against you, but it was very well refereed, and it was fair, and that's all we wanted. And that's all St. Gall's ever really wanted, and that had been drummed into them again from early on. Play the game fair and play it hard and fair. Shimmy McGorn was one of the best footballers I ever played with, defensively wise. Not for shooting Shimmy, no harm to you. Shimmy always said that anybody who played against the Gauls, that it was hard and fair, and there was no blackguardism or there was no rascality ever when you were playing against the Gauls. But we got a fair crack of the whip that day, and I think Joe McQuillan made a referee, as I can't remember exactly, but we got away with it. But it was a carrot and stick job more, man. For this is a semi-final. You've been in semi-finals before, so. There's no point stopping now. We've won it. We've won well. We've beat the club champions from the All Ireland champions. So it was a carrot and stick job then to get. Let's see, can we get to an Ulster final?
Did you and Danny do radio silence then before the final? For listeners, John and Danny Quinn are very tight, but Danny Quinn, if you cut him, would bleed blue. So Blahy was another club with tradition, the 21 titles to their name. They'd been in All Ireland finals, they won it themselves, and again.
Yeah.
And I remember being at that game, they wore Derry jerseys and you wore yellow jerseys or something. Was it Roma?
We had to wear Antrim jerseys, and they wore the Derry jerseys.
Or like custom made St. Gall's jerseys that were yellow or whatever, or something like that.
No, funny, we had them custom made ones for the club final that year. No harm to Gaelic here. I'm not saying it all boiled down. It was like kind of playing seals. If you ever see any of the photographs of the All Ireland club final in 2006, now I've only ever seen the photographs once or twice. I've never watched the game. Can't watch it. And but there are a number of occasions where the fellas they're chasing out to get a ball, and the wind has caught their jersey, and it's like they're running in a sail, a yellow sail. Now the firm that made them are no longer in operation, so I'm not going to name them, but your jerseys were shite. And it's not often you say I've been an awful man with jerseys. The boys got to keep their jerseys that day because nobody ever wanted to wear them again. But we got, to their credit, Antrim County Board lent us a set of jerseys for the Ulster Club final up in Homa that day. And you're right. No, I did speak to Danny before it. You talk about significant others. There are, outside of those people who coached me, Ray Morgan, Pete McGrath. I didn't play for St. Coleman's, but I learned a lot because I shut up and listened in PE. Charlie Sweeney, Jim McKeever, Peter Finn, they're all brilliant fellas. But you see, if there was no Danny Quinn, I'd still be playing away for the pass and wondering what it would be like to get a game at the next level. Now, Danny Quinn I was very, very lucky that Danny Quinn was in my professional studies class in St. Mary's, and Danny and me hit it off from the word go, and he is one of life's true warriors and a gentleman, and a warrior in a quiet and effective way, but he's such a good fella. But I didn't ask him about the team, and we did.
He was never going to tell you.
No, he was never going to tell me directly. But we did speak to each other in the run up to the game, and he wanted the best for Blahy, and he wanted and that was okay. And I wanted the best for St. Gall's, and Danny was never going to fall out because Danny had been taking Carrigan that year in 2004, I think maybe, and we beat Carrigan in the county final. and Carrickmore had beat us in the first round of the championship, but there was a back door, so it wasn't the end of the world if it didn't work out for us that evening up, and it was up in Portland, I think it was, and Danny's good fella. You couldn't beat him, and we had played. Like Damien's a good fella too. He would bleed blue as well. We had played the Old Tongues up in Drummoney. It wasn't that long opened in 2000.
It's not as fancy as it is now.
No, it was basic, but it was very good. And we had played them during the summer, and they'd give us a bit of a clipping. And it worked out all right, ma.
Would you say both have been full out? The way challenge games are sort of...
Yeah. Well, they thought we were closer to full out maybe than we really were. So, like I say, that's why God give you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You don't always let on, that's me full out, and you knew you had 1 or 2 still to come in who could add wee bits and pieces. But again, CJ hadn't been seen at that stage, and Gary McGuire maybe didn't play that evening, and those 2 or 3 others didn't play. But like I say, as there was, I can remember Sean O'Depar been interviewed after Galway won the All Ireland in '98, and they talked about John O'Mahony, God rest him, talking about people who push the piano and people who play the piano. And we had a lot of piano players for St. Galls, but when you had Kieran McCrossan and Gary McGuire, them boys could push it. They could play it a wee bit too, but by Jesus, they could push the piano if you pushed, and Gary McGuire was very important to that team. For good fella. He didn't play that evening up again, Balahi up in Drummoney, but when it come to, a November day in Omagh, and maybe the pitch a wee bit sticky, like Gary knew, he knew the pitch inside out himself, and he knew the crack. He was very, very good that day.
1-8 tells you there's another tight rosy beads job. We might not tape day. So
yeah. Well,
what's your memories of it? Because St. Galls had won an Ulster before that and tried to win another one and didn't. So it's obviously a significant day in your memory and St. Galls. So what sticks out for you?
Well, and I remember it was hard keeping a lid on the excitement to some degree. Paul Flanagan, such a good fella, that helped out that year, and Collie was there as well. And we had a nice, tidy bus, to get up, not travelling up in cars, the simplicity of going together. And there was I can remember chatting on the bus to them, fellas, saying, listen now, boys, we'll not win this game on the bus between here and Omagh, but we could lose it if we're acting a candy man. So the crack was good on the bus, but it wasn't one of those, you're not allowed to speak on the bus, carry on.
Yeah.
And there was a great sense of excitement that when we got into the change rooms, and one of them Niblock skitters, I think, it's somewhere, recorded what was said before the game. I didn't know it was being recorded. I don't think.
Are we allowed to add this to the podcast?
Yeah, well, if you can find it, you use away at it. I don't know. One of them has it anyway.
Would it put us in court? Would it?
Put me in court. Kangaroo court. And I know that the fellas were ready. The fellas were ready, and it was a foregone conclusion. It was a good Balahi team. Who
had beat Crossmaglen in Crossmaglen.
Who had beat Cross in Cross. And probably that worked in our favour in that they'd beat Cross in Cross, and then they were going to play some Galls who the Loop had beaten a couple of years earlier in a similar situation. So probably they'd beaten us during the summer in a challenge match and beaten us well, wee bits and pieces, And I remember chatting to Kevin. I was very lucky then. I got 3 great years coaching up in Balahi as well. I really enjoyed it. And a good Slaughtneil team beat us not by a whole lot in the semi-final one time. There wasn't as much in it as it looked. I remember chatting to Kevin one time, Kevin Doherty, and Kevin said he had that feeling if Balahi played any at all that day, that it beat St Gall's in the club final. And I thought it was a significant comment, given that that was probably coming on the back of the fact that they had beaten us in the challenge match in Drummond during the summer. But we had come on leaps and bounds from then, you know, and added one or two personnel changes that I know we had worked out okay. And again, Kieran McCrossan, I can't remember Kieran's lad's name, but he ripped a St Paul's jersey in a McLaren match there 3 or 4 years ago. When I found out who he was, I wasn't even cross with him, because when your daddy scores a goal that helps your club win an Ulster Club Championship, you can rip away at the jersey, son, because you're Kieran McCrossan's son. But Kieran was a good, solid. Suited in that day. It turned into a day for honest fellas, and that's what Kieran was, an honest fella.
What was that feeling like? You talked about Seamus McFerrin being up at the front of the bus, and it didn't matter what the pitch looked like back in March, but when the cup's there and it's in the changing room, and I always think, again, looking in from the outside, I always look in at a team. When you're working in my game, you see teams coming out of dressing rooms with cups, and you see them getting on the bus, and you see homecomings, and you see those types of things. But what's it like to be in there and be in the bubble and walk into the clubhouse and all that type of thing? Because it's not on the field, but it's so significant.
Yeah, well, I know that. You know, I have a lot of good days in St Gall's, and without a shadow of a doubt, the bus stopped at up in the Falls Road, or at the top of the lane down in the Middletown Road there, and the fellas walked down, and Sean Kelly's shoulder was fixed rightly at that stage. Like, he got on for the last minute.
Couple of minutes.
And I can remember them carrying the cup down that lane, and there was a lot of people in the club. I remember chatting to me. He says, somebody said to me for the Irish News or something, I don't know what it was, is there many people in the clubs who say, never mind, you couldn't swing a cat in that place, you couldn't swing a kitten in it, you know, but there wasn't room for any. And that was one of the best nights ever. You know, I have a lot of good nights out, and that was one of the best nights. And I was stone cold sober, and I was at my work the next morning, and it was one of the best nights of my life, man. But to see the Mickey Culberts, the Frank McGuires, you know, the Frank Dawsons, you know, the Collie McAllister, who played along with me, and Collie was along the line with me that year too, to see them so happy, and when you considered that, you know, they'd won an Ulster Club in 82 or 82 maybe, in around about that time, early 80s, and someone like John Kennedy, God be good him, his son Simon had done the same as his daddy, and I was lucky to play in the middle of the field with John, God rest him, when we won the championship in 1990. And suddenly all that emotion comes out in it, and you know, if you're not standing with a lump in your throat, you shouldn't be part of the GAA. You know, go and get yourself a snooker cue and go on down get out of the road, you know, because that night in St Gall's was one of the best. It may have been a morning. Catherine was very good, very talented. Like I say, I'm not a big man for drinking and stuff like that. There, the man says, in a life, I'm no teetotaler, but a man says, a man who really drinks would have spilt more than I have drunk in a lifetime. You know, so I got into the car stone cold sober, and I drove home that night, and I didn't get home till the wee small hours, and the fellas were still as happy as Larry in that club. And I was in work the next morning, and I don't buy the papers, Mal. I'm too miserable. I wouldn't buy the paper, but Mommy bought the paper the next morning. You know what? It made great reading. It made great reading to see the fellas in the photograph of them with the cup, and it was just pure emotion. You know, and I might be touched after, I don't know, maybe just mental, but even you see fellas been interviewed after, you know, like Clifford there after, and you can see the emotion in them fellas' face, and if it doesn't draw a lump in your throat, you know, you're missing the point of the GAA. You know, you're missing the point of that pure, honest parochialism that, you know, when people say, you can't have parochialism up in Belfast because it's a big place. But no, them fellas, you know, you have, let's say in Carrickmore, they maybe all go to primary school together, or 2 or 3 week country primary schools, and they maybe go to Dean McGurk together, and want to know, so they're together. But them fellas from St Gall's were together from 10 or 12 years of age, and they had got to within touch and distance then of the ultimate prize, but they had won an Ulster Club Championship, and they really enjoyed it. And it was lovely. It's lovely to see young fellas happy. it's like there's a lot of bad news in the world. So when you see people happy, it's just me. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to be inside. Inside the ground is a privilege in itself, but to be inside the wire on the white line when something like that happens is magnificent. Is the only way to describe it.
As you say, nothing beats playing, but that's as close as it gets.
Yeah, it's nothing beats playing, man. I would say, I'm 57 now, heading for 58. I still think I could do goals. And it's in the back of my head. Like 6 months of training, get the wee pot belly off me. And get my shoulder fixed. I think I could give you 10 minutes. But back in the real world, if you can't play, at least if you're along the line, you're close to it, you're involved in it, and that's as good as it's going to get, but it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be along the line. And like I say, for any man that takes his own club, it's a privilege, and I was invited in and played for St. Gall's for 10 years. And I would still like to think that I'm a St. Gall's man. I'm a past man, but I'm a St. Gall's man at heart too.
Nemo Rangers, massive club. You talk about challenges, getting your teeth into that, and as I said to you earlier on, I just remember sitting watching that in TG Car at home, and it seemed to I've just visions of a really windy day and CJ kicking one and the breeze just sort of curling it into the road end. I can just maybe I think I've got it right. And
you have it.
There wasn't much in that game.
No, there wasn't much in it, but your man Masters had been unbelievable. The week after
we 1-5 that day against us.
The week after we won the Ulster club, myself and the brother went down to the Munster final, and there was no bullshit or codology about it. It was down, and at the end of the game, our fella turned to me and he says, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "We beat them boys." I said, "We'll beat them boys."
Why?
I just knew, there was, anytime you played against Cork, in the National League, and I played against Cork 3 or 4 times with Armagh, either they'd beat you by 20 points or you'd beat them by 10. There was no, and I looked at them coming away from it. I stayed on, as everybody was parading out of the ground that day. I can't remember where the ground was, but it was way down the country anyway. And I stayed right to the bitter end. I would say there wasn't a Nemo fan left in the place. I just watched and watched and watched what was going on. And somebody in the crowd...
That's why you were given 2 A's, you see.
Yeah. Somebody in the crowd, in the Nemo fan says, "Who do we play now?" And someone says, "Oh, the Ulster champions." "Who's that?" St. Gall's. "Where are they from?" "Antrim." "We'll beat them, no bother." And I turned around to her and I says, "That's why we'll beat them." I said, because they won't give the respect to St. Gall's that they deserve. And if I had run out when the whistle was blew, man, you've got to sit tight, keep your mouth shut, and just see what's going on. And I can remember that being said, they're from the Antrim team, we'll beat them.
Was it somebody attached to the team or a supporter, or just...
It was somebody on the fringe of it, I think it was a supporter, but...
That was the mentality.
It was the mentality, and I knew that, and I reinforced it to the fellas that as we were getting ready to play Nemo, and to be very good. And the LaSalle brothers were very good. We went down to Glenallen on the far side of Port and stayed a couple of weekends before it, and got a run out. Of course, Port didn't let us play an in-house game on the field. There's a wee training field out the back that let us play it. And there was a significant moment in it. There was good competition for places, and we were playing among ourselves, and there was a coming together of 2 players, which left one of the players on the probables with a bloody nose, and the fella from the possibles just come clattered into him, just clattered into him, and I blew the whistle. I didn't blow the whistle too often, that whistle had to do me 40 years. I didn't want to dry the pee out on her, so the fella who had the bloody nose went to hit a quick free, and I says, "What are you doing?" He says, "My free." I said, No, sir, not your free. He says, "It's free against you for your caught in possession." The blood was flying out of him. And he looked at me and I says, "But you're not be caught in possession when next time we're in Portlaoise." So, and we played on, and it was one of those wee incidences that, holy Moses, that it was hard getting out of Ulster, but it was going to be even harder again, and it was close against Nemo, but
10 points to 1-6.
Yeah, I always felt that we were going to win it. Always, and then we were
even along the line, even during the game.
The fellas that during the game, the fellas never panicked, and they just played away. And we had I don't like using the term game plan because the fellas in St. Gall's were never stuck to a rigid plan. You didn't need that. Like Aidan Gall was a super fella. We played a wing half forward, and just every now and again, if I saw something going wrong, I said, "Aidan, fill the middle," and he just get back. But he's such a good fella. Like he's still such a significant player for St. Gall's at the present time. And he's in his very late 30s. But St. Gall's were always encouraged to play with their head up and play with the sea rather than this strict game plan that you can only do what you're only allowed to do, But the fellas knew what they were able to do and they did what they were able to do, but they played with their head up and they played away. And then we sprung CJ towards the end of it, and he was significant when he came on because he could score. But again, Sean Burns gave a masterclass, an absolute masterclass of free taking that day in Portlaoise. And God rest Vincent Ward. I can remember coming down. He gave me a big hug after the game. He says, we're there. And I said, yes, Vincent said, but we haven't won yet. So maybe I just should have enjoyed the moment a wee bit more. But I already was thinking about St. Patrick's Day. But it was great. It was great. It was a long spin down the road, but we got up the road regularly anyway. It didn't seem too far going up the road.
And then getting the build up to the final, as you said earlier on, it's something that never leaves you, and that's exactly the way everybody's wired. You don't, if you invest so much time, energy, and thought into something, you just can't shake it off. It's going to stay. But going into that final, where did you? It was 7 points to 6 on a windy day. I remember sitting in a bar in Prague watching it, St. Paddy's Day, and just seeing them jerseys you're talking about just blowing. It was so windy. But going into the game, did you feel 50-50? Like you felt you beat Nemo? Did you feel you had it in your grasp? Well, as underdogs, or
to the credit, the fellas never. They didn't run away with it. No, we were very good. The club organised for us to go down and get a run out on Croke Park, but. The day we got our run out in Croke Park, they had the lights down at the Canal End, so we couldn't play the in-house game that we wanted to. But Salthill and Knocknacara, they got access to the full field when they were allowed down. So we knew we were up against it. Everybody tiptoes around it, well, but you look after your own when you cross the line on the map, and it was quite apparent that day I wasn't too pleased, but we did our best and we went down and. Listen, if Michael Donlan had stayed at home that day, St. Gall's would have won the All-Ireland Club title in 2006, and that's just it. So to be beaten,
an unbelievable player,
to be beaten on the back of a top-class performance from an unbelievable player, there's no shame in that. There's no shame in that. We didn't take all our scoring chances that we did. I haven't looked at it. I told you I haven't looked at it, but I always have my doubts about the square ball that was given against us. The whistle was nearly blew before we made contact on it. And that that is significant. I've never watched it. I've never watched the McCrory final from 2012. I've never watched the McCrory final from 2016. I just don't watch them. There's no point because it's not going to get any better. And the disappointment, if I watched any of those three games again, the disappointment again, even the McLaren final in 2011 when we against Mary's beat us. Oh wow, it wouldn't be any better. I just don't watch it, But I remember that day being extremely disappointed, and knowing in my heart of hearts that there was no shame in being so close to the ultimate prize, But I was amazed. I'm not a great man for, releasing information from the change room. To me is sacred. But on the bus, of course, I was torturing myself, as I'm still torturing myself. But Salthill knocked the Carrickmore out, and they were dressed in this lovely, whether it was a sports jacket or chinos, but they were very well dressed, like. And a bunch of fellas, you could hear them singing in the back of the bus, all right, stick your chinos up your hole. And I thought automatically, and I said to myself, you know what? Then young fellas get over that quicker than I will, You probably have to bleep that one out, pal. But
they did get over it, and they did win that All Ireland. And I'm guessing you're not surprised they won it.
No, I was
Maybe
delighted.
I'm putting words in your mouth there, but you probably. No, I'm not surprised in London won it. But what did you feel?
I wasn't surprised in that. I was terribly disappointed, and then I took sick. After it, we went on Easter of that year, and on the Thursday night, you talk about wettings you get. I got a wetting doing umpire on an under-10 match up in Drummondty on Holy Thursday night of 2006. And I knew I wasn't in great shape, but you paddle on. And then on Easter Sunday of 2006, St Andrews had a wee tournament up. There was ourselves and somebody else in Balahi, and they played the two semi-finals and the final on the same day. And we played early in the day, and we got soaked again. I had no change of clothes with me. And we had to hang about then, and we played Balahi in the afternoon, and I was foundered. And on the Monday, we were going down to, my sister lives down in Carrickmore, just the far side of Knock. I knew I wasn't well driving down the car. I said, Christ, I can't get this shock at all from the founder. The two founders very close to each other. But I didn't realise I had pneumonia. And it shook me, and it shook me heavily. Probably coming on the back of the disappointment of St Patrick's Day, and the fact that St Gall's, we had no lights. You weren't allowed to train in. You weren't allowed any lights, because of the birds down in Milltown. Mm-hmm. So we moved about from place to place, and the net result was I had a trailer full of tackle bags and bibs and balls and cones, and I just trailed that stuff around the country with me all winter. Mm-hmm. At the back of the car, which was even the packing of the trailer had its own specific way to get everything into it. And then I took pneumonia and missed the start of the league in 06, and then Carrigan beat us in the first round of the championship, and that was as big a disappointment for me as it was. I knew if I could get them over Carrigan, and I was got myself right back into a wee bit of shape myself, that would give it another bit of a run. But it was a blip. It was only a blip. Them fellas were tired from the winter that had possibly, and we had walked Division 1 in Antrim that year, and in the last league game we would beat Carrigan by 15 points or something, and then they caught us fair and square encasement in the first round of the championship. But I think that stung the players too. And if I'm being honest, I stepped down that evening in the change rooms. It was probably a bit rush, And Vincent Ward and I chatted about it relatively recently before Vincent died. Vincent and I had a good long chat about it. But there was nobody happier in Grove Park in 2010 when St Gall's won, and it was fitting that Lenny was along the line for them, because Lenny had been some servant to St Gall's in his time too, so it was right. It was right that when they won their All Ireland, that Lenny was there, but nobody was any happier in St Jones's Road than I was that day.
And winning that Ulster. They obviously won the Ulster, then won the way to All Ireland, but winning that Ulster had to be a significant bridge.
Yeah, I think for the fella's own belief well, that they added in a couple of new fellas in between 06 and 2010. And I remember going down to watch them playing cross in Uri and cross McLean one time. And I remember being disappointed for the players on both occasions, which was an excellent cross McLean team and caught them twice. But I do think the players got wrapped up in playing against Cross rather than playing for St. Galls. And that was the key to the thing. If you decide you're playing against Cross at any age level, you're beat. That's it. Especially that Cross McLean team at that time. It was sprinkled with the Twins and Oisin and fellas like that there who were unbelievable county players and were outstanding club players. So they were sprinkled all through it. But I was very disappointed in that the fellas appeared to be focused on playing Cross rather than playing for St. Galls. And the year they made the breakthrough, Pearse Oaks had caught Cross, an understrength Cross in the championship here in Armagh, and then St. Galls beat them in Casement, and I can remember having a robust discussion with somebody in the stands in 2010. I think St. Galls gave away a goal in the first passage of play in 2010, the first minute or something like that there. And he says, so your man was been very loud about it, and his club would score a goal in the club final. I says, good man, to say. So with St. Galls has 59 minutes to balance them 3 points back. I say, don't you get too flustered about your goal. And maybe it just wasn't as calm as that, but it was words to that effect. But they were very good. They won it at a counter, which was lovely to see, because at that stage they had refound the fact that they weren't playing against anybody else; they were playing for St. Galls, and that was the secret ingredient, if you want to call it that, Mal. That once they focused on themselves, didn't matter who St. Galls played. If St. Galls played top notch, there was nobody in the country who was fit to play against them, because they were a lovely footballing team.
Finally, when you think back to 05, what is there anything that jumps straight out at you about the whole, even the 2 or 3 years building towards it, and what's your takeaway? It's probably a difficult question, but is there anything that really stands above everything else?
Well, I know that there was a great sense with the first time at the start of 04 when I went to meet the players. There was a sense of, this feels right. I had spent 10 years playing for St. Galls and loved every minute of playing for St. Galls. I was very, very disappointed we could be in the county final in '97. And funny, I know that you spoke to Peter about the Mullabon winning that Ulster Club title in '95, and we had played Mullabon, a real good Mullabon team, in a challenge match a fortnight before a county final in '87. Keesu was playing the McNulty's and that quiet, unassuming gentleman. Tierney was in nets and stuff like that there, and it was we played in the Bosco pitch up in Uri on a lovely summer's evening, a late summer evening, and it was an absolutely ding-dong game of football, and we were very ready for the county final. And we made a few adjustments going into the county final based on the strength of that challenge match, and it upset the balance of the team. And we didn't have that balance redressed until the second half against a very good St. Paul's team. And, I'd always been disappointed that I come out of Antrim with 2 championship medals when I really felt that we should have had 3. But going in 2004, that was 7 years later, it wasn't a lifetime after Mal, but it just felt right. To their credit, for a blow-in from the country, St. Galls always made me feel very, very welcome, and I remember, God rest Brother Leopold, I got an All-Star nominee in '93, and I could run down and show you the thing now. The All-Star nominee was neither here nor there to me, but it was nice. But St. Galls gave me the loveliest bit of Belfast crystal with just that written on it. John Rafferty, 1983, St. Galls All-Star nominee, and I have that. I can remember Brother Leopold and what he said that evening at the dinner dance. I was flattered. and there was that great sense of being where you belong. When we got together at the start of the middle, near March of 2004, to set the wheels in motion.
So, Rafferty, thanks a million for an hour or so of memories. And you didn't get the big one at the end of it all. You get loads of memories. And that's the end of our podcast for this week. We will be back on Monday, where we'll be looking back at a weekend of championship action from across Ulster. John, thank you very much again for your time.
No problem, Mal. Thanks for the invite.
Experience hospitality the Northwest way at the Everglades Hotel. Located on the banks of the River Foyle, the Everglades Hotel is just minutes from the centre of Derry, Londonderry, with free on-site guest car parking. Whether you're here for a family meal, a big celebration, or simply a peaceful retreat, will make your experience as memorable as the sights in the city. Visit Everglades Hotel Derry for accommodation bookings, the latest menus, live shows and events, and much, much more. See you there.